right, and welcome back to the Hall Pass podcast. Today we have another special episode for you. Thank you to the Mission Masters for sponsoring us. I'm your host, Jay Park, and I have Richard here with me again to help us make sense of the changes resulting from the coronavirus lockdown. Today we want to focus on some key updates regarding official grade and testing requirement changes, as well as additional test date postponement changes. I want to dive right into the first big news. The UC application requirements have been temporarily eased, and I'm here with Vincent to kind of make sense of each of their points that they made. How are you doing there, Vincent?
I'm good. I think, they've already released some of their statements on what changes will be made as a result of the coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there was something specific you want to focus on, or we can just kind of run through each of these points.
Yeah, let's just start from top to bottom, and let's see if we have any questions that might pop up as a parent or a student.
Sure.
The first one being that they are suspending the letter grade requirement for A through G courses completed in winter, spring, and summer of 2020 for all students, including UC's most recently admitted freshmen, so the seniors right now. So what does that mean, suspending the letter grade requirements?
So in order for you to receive credit for the A through G courses so that you can get accepted to a UC school, typically you need to get a letter grade in those courses. But they're making it so that that's no longer required, especially since some high schools have now gone pass-fail for their courses. And so they are no longer requiring you to have a specific letter grade in order for you to satisfy those requirements to be eligible for the UCs.
Now, my immediate question there would be, how would that impact students that are kind of going through a GPA grind or are in a situation where maybe they wanted to use their junior year last semester to boost their GPA? How does that affect students in terms of the admissions process?
So I think the UCs are trying to make it as clear as possible that this isn't going to be a major determining factor in who gets accepted, especially since if you don't have a choice and your school only allows pass, no pass grading, then that's just the way it is. And so it's not like you have the option to choose, although some schools do give you the option to choose. And so if they do, if your school is making it so that you don't get a letter grade for your second semester and you're relying on your GPA to be boosted from this semester, unfortunately, if you do pass, no pass, your grades won't be counted. And so it won't count towards your GPA, and you're going to be kind of stuck with the GPA that you have now. Maybe you can take solace in the fact that, again, colleges will, take this semester with a grain of salt, and they'll maybe put a little bit more weight on your previous semesters. But at this point, that's kind of what we're looking at right now.
So the ways that the UCs are doing it, the picture I have in my mind is that, would it be fair to say that they would be really just looking up until your first semester of junior year grades, so that the second semester, whether it's pass or fail, whether they allowed or not, in a way it's kind of tainted? It's not really going to be that substantive.
I think, well, if you pass at the very least, it still looks good. It just, again, it won't demonstrate the same level of rigor and your success in taking rigorous courses, because we wouldn't see how well you actually did if you got straight A's or if you ended up with a few B's. We're not able to tell that if we only see if you passed or didn't. But still, passing is a good thing. And if you are, again, not given the option, at the very least, we're going to expect that you pass all of these courses that you're taking.
Right. So I'm just thinking, in this case, who is it advantageous for? Who is it disadvantageous for? It's advantageous for students that started strong, especially in junior year, with good grades, so that they didn't have to piggyback off of having to rely on second semester show that upward swing. So it's a huge advantage for them. I feel like it might be a disadvantage for those students who started a little stumbling first semester and we're relying on second to show that upward swing.
Right, to show that they've kind of adapted. Right. And we're able to get back on track. I agree with that. I think at the end of the day, the UCs are stressing that they're not lowering the bar of admissions, but I think it's pretty clear that some students will still be in a more advantageous state. And again, I agree with you that those students who did better during their first semester junior year, and maybe just like the first 3 years of high school, not including their second semester, those students are going to be a little bit more well off. Whereas if you struggled a bit, you are unfortunately not given many opportunities to show that you've improved.
So even if you were to be in a situation where you're pass fail and you were relying on the second semester to boost your GPA to show that upward swings, what are the options? Are you saying that maybe we'd have to find alternatives with like online schools or summer schools? Would that be possible?
I think you can do that. I think there are options for you to take courses at a local community college. We have students taking courses at schools like IBC, UCI, Harvey Mudd, where you actually do end up getting a letter grade, and you can send that official transcript to your colleges as part of your applications. That could be a smart idea, depending
Mm,
on how much other things you have going on in your summer. But if we are still isolated and stuck at home, and you have the option to take these virtual courses to boost your GPA, that might be a good move.
okay. All right. Moving on to the second um, requirement, easement. The UCs have officially suspending the standardized test requirement for students applying for the fall 2021 freshman admission. So that would be current juniors going towards senior year this year. That means they're
Correct.
suspending the standardized test requirement.
Yeah.
What does that mean for us?
So for the most part, the UCs and a lot of other colleges, and there's a few of these who have gone test optional, but they're aware of the fact that a lot of high school students were relying on this period to take their standardized tests. And so if you didn't take your standardized test before, I guess, March of this year, you're kind of out of luck because you don't have a lot of opportunities to take them. And so they are going test optional, which means that if you don't have a test score to be showing to colleges, you don't have to send it to the UCs, and they'll still review your application and make sure that your admissions chances aren't hurt as a result of the fact that you didn't submit your standardized tests.
I raise an eyebrow to this. Are you really telling me that I don't need to submit a test score? Or actually, more pointedly, someone who still does take the test and still does submit the score, if it's an impressive score, do you think that they would be put towards an advantage compared to a student that doesn't submit a score?
So I think so. Ultimately, I think if
Okay.
you have gotten a really good SAT score or a very strong SAT 2 scores, and you are submitting those, and you are being put up against a student who didn't submit any standardized test scores, obviously, looking at those standardized test scores from the student who did well, um, demonstrates proficiency, and it's something that I think college admissions officers will have to take into account when reviewing these students' applications. Having
Mhm.
said that, I do think, and we mentioned this last time, I do think they're going to be de-emphasizing these test scores a bit. We're going to have to wait and see because this hasn't really been done before. My assumption is that if you have good test scores, it can potentially help and provide more context. But at the
Mm.
same time, so many admissions officers are stressing the fact that these students who do not submit test scores will not be put at a disadvantage.
The reason
Uh,
why I'm asking, sorry to interrupt, but the
yeah, go
reason
ahead.
why I'm asking is trying to think of immediate real life scenarios with some of my students. For example, one of my students doesn't have the strongest GPA, but has really good test scoring abilities. And so
Yeah,
we were kind of relying on strong test scores to
yeah.
kind of compensate for the grades. But
Mhm.
if this happens for the UCs, do you think that it's still worth it to pursue that kind of strategy if they're saying that it's no longer required?
Well, I think we'll have to flex to a different strategy for sure. I mean, if
Okay.
honestly, if they were just relying on strong test scores, but obviously if they didn't have, good GPAs, good activities, good essays, I mean, their chances of getting into at least a top tier UC,
Mm,
it was probably not that high anyways. But having said that, I think, honestly, the students who are probably the most benefited from this will be those students who are not the best test takers, right?
mm.
Since other things like your grades and your activities and your essays will be weighted more heavily, the students who aren't the best test takers, I think, will find it a little bit easier to get accepted to these schools. Is my assumption. Obviously, I don't know for sure, but I think that those students who are really good test takers and maybe not have the best GPA or might not have the best activities, those are the students who are going to be hurt the most by this.
All right, I'm going to do a bit of a counselor moment right now. I'm going to give you the scenario that I think might be going through some of our listeners' minds.
Sure.
We're currently junior year. We've been studying for the SAT, and coronavirus, this update comes out. Student says, it's not required anymore, so I don't need to take it. Should we still encourage the student to take it? We're going to talk later on about how they've adapted the test dates to offer every month of the summer to accommodate for the cancellations in March through May.
Mhm.
The question is if they've had zero prep, or if they had 50% prep, or if they've been prepping hardcore boot camp style, where do you decide let's still take the test versus we don't need to take the test?
So if you are a 0% prepared and you have
Mm,
other things that you can be doing with your time, at that point, I think it could be a viable strategy to not be studying for the standardized test and not have to take it. But I will still recommend that students should take the SAT. And I think, again, number one, it's because potentially it can still provide some context to the UCs for how strong you are academically. And so I would still recommend it if possible. In addition to that, I think the UCs mentioned that if you take the SAT, it can potentially help for things like certain scholarships and also to potentially fulfill some university graduation requirements. They
mm,
mentioned that it can support your statewide UC eligibility, which means that again, it might be useful and might make you a stronger candidate for these colleges. So if you've been preparing in this hypothetical situation, if the student has been 50% prepared and was planning on taking it in June, and we'll talk about this, but the June test has now been pushed back again to
okay.
August.
Okay.
But if they've been preparing, I think at this point might as well keep preparing and take it, anticipating, that the test will happen in August.
Yeah, and that's also to kind of scope us outwards. This is only an update in regards to the UC application requirements. There are many other schools that still haven't changed their policy, that still want to see an SAT score.
Mhm.
But there are also many schools that have actually kind of gone the way of the UCs and started to make their testing optional. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
So schools like Tufts, Northeastern, Pomona College, Boston University, University of Washington, a lot of these colleges have already decided that they're going to go test optional. And you can find a list of these if you
Mm,
just do a quick Google search. But some colleges have actually implemented a 3-year pilot program where they're not just going test optional for this year's application cycle, but for the next 3 years. So some schools like Haverford and Davidson and Case Western have implemented this 3-year pilot program to go test optional and kind of see how that goes.
okay. All right. All right. Continuing on with the UC requirements, easements, another change that was made, quote, providing that there will be no rescindment of student admission offers that result from students or schools missing official final transcript deadlines, and student retention of admission status through the first day of class until official documents are received by campus. I had a hard time just even reading that. Could you help me make sense of that, please?
I mean, so in order for you to just make sure that you are good to go once you're accepted by a UC, so for current seniors, if you're
Mm,
accepted by a UC and typically you have to submit your final transcript by July 1st, otherwise you're rescinded, which means that they just take your acceptance away. This year, they're not doing that. They know that there are potential issues with getting these official documents since we're not physically in school. And so they're letting students miss that deadline. I guess you should still try to send it in by July 1st if possible.
I see. Okay.
Yeah,
So the
but
gist of this is for seniors, we need your transcript at the end to confirm your credits and your grades and whatnot. But we
exactly.
know that it might not come in time due to the coronavirus. So we're going to ease off if you don't submit it in time.
Right. And as long as you have
Okay.
submitted all of the official documents by the first day of class, which tends
Mhm.
to be maybe like mid-September for the UCs, maybe early September for some. But I think as long as you submit them by then, you should be okay.
Understood. The next one is for transfer students. Transfer students temporarily suspending the cap on the number of transferable units with pass no pass grading applied toward the minimum 60 semester 90 quarter units required for junior standing. I need you to help me again here.
So I think for junior students, or sorry, for transfer students who are trying to get into the UCs, there was typically a cap on how many units you were allowed to take for pass no pass grading.
Mm,
But because of the coronavirus and the fact that there will be some distance learning at this point, more classes are moving from the graded scale to the pass no pass scale, which means that they have to remove that cap to allow more of these transferable units that will be pass no pass grading.
okay. And then the last thing I can understand here is that the UCs will still be awarding the UC credit transfers of AP scores, consistent with previous years. So the for the listeners here, the AP tests have changed to the 45-minute at-home open book test. And the question has been, are those new tests going to be recognized and give transferable credit like the previous test did? The answer is yes. The UCs will
Mhm.
honor them. So it's still very important, my students, to be studying as hard as you can for these AP scores. Any additional point? Any final thought here for the UCs?
Really quickly, just for seniors who were planning on taking the AP exams, because I got a student last week who asked me about this, but she was wondering, does she still have to take these AP exams, especially
Mhm.
since they cost money and she could get a full refund if she cancels them with their school now. And I recommended that if she knows where she's going, for her, she was going to UCLA, she can decide to take only those AP exams that will
Mhm.
provide her with college credit.
Mm,
So
okay.
if she is taking, let's say, 6 AP exams and 4 of those will not be beneficial for her, I'm okay with her just not taking those AP exams and getting a full refund, because honestly, they're unnecessary at this point. And she can
Right.
take those 2 to potentially get a 3, 4, 5 and earn college credit to save both time and money once she goes to UCLA.
Right. So for seniors, you got to decide on a school, and then you check out the college's AP credit transfer policies, what
Mhm.
scores they'll allow, what score minimum you need to get for each subject. And based on that, the suggestion here is don't take everything unless, wait, how would I say this? How would I phrase this?
I
Take
mean,
only
I
the
would
ones, go ahead.
for her. So sorry, I should have rephrased that. She
It's
was
okay.
in a very particular situation where, financially speaking, she just didn't want to waste money, and her
Hmm.
family didn't want to, spend money needlessly on an
Hmm.
exam that again wouldn't be useful for her. For other students, I think, I mean, at the end of the day, I would still recommend just sticking with those AP exams that you've taken if it's not a big burden financially speaking, because you're still testing yourself on the knowledge that you've gained from this. So just from like an educational standpoint, I think it's a good idea to take these AP exams. But again, financially speaking, if that's going to be a burden for you to be paying, the money for this, in that case, then I would recommend looking into the specific AP credit transfer policies to
Mm.
determine whether or not you need to be taking these exams.
I think beyond even just like the finance too, it's also kind of the workload and burden. If you know that you can score well on 3 versus spreading yourself thin and do poorly on 6, I think
Sure.
it'd be that kind of argument too. But well spoken, well heard. The other big thing for today's special episode was about test date changes. So I want to dive into that.
Hmm.
The first big test date change obviously comes from the College Board itself, the SAT and SAT subject tests. There's been recent updates that we're happy to share with you today.
Hmm.
The first of it being to keep students safe and in alignment with public health guidance and school closures across the world, we will not be administering the SAT or SAT subject tests on June 6, 2020. So boys and girls, if you've signed up for the June test, you might want to go on College Board right now to see that it actually has been canceled. And I think they offer kind of a recourse, the next step, so that you can re-register for a future test date for free, which is kind of nice of them to do.
Hmm.
Any thoughts about what this means that June 6th has been canceled?
Well, you have more time to study now, and I think they actually added a September test. Usually, it's for the SAT. It's only August, October, November, December. But
Right.
now it's the entire fall and winter testing dates. So August, September, October, November, December. So there
Mhm.
are more attempts for you. Hopefully, I mean, again, we're anticipating that the August one won't get pushed back. But if it doesn't, then you'll have potentially 4 or 5 opportunities to take it again.
And I haven't really seen too much information. How for example, AP tests have changed to online at home 45 minutes. Is there any news about the SAT structure itself changing, or is it going to be more the kind of still we're waiting for the virus to die down and then we're going to continue as norm going into a classroom to take this test?
I haven't heard anything on whether or
Okay.
not the tests are going to be taken from home. I know
Hmm.
that the TOEFL test, they've already had an at-home exam, so they're still keeping their test dates and they're allowing students to take the TOEFL from home. But
Oh,
for the SAT, yeah, I haven't heard whether or not they're going to switch to an at-home exam. From what I understand, it's going to stay at testing centers and they'll have to be in person.
gotcha. For just a quick point there, then, the for students who are international or English is not your first language, the TOEFL exam has been modified so that it's now a take home. So beginning this spring, you can just continue as is, but take the test from home. So
Mhm.
I'm curious as whether the SAT will make that change. I heard that we just have to wait and see.
Yeah.
How about the ACT?
So the ACT, interestingly, is still gonna keep their June test. I think they're waiting to just confirm whether or not they should be moving this as well. So
Mhm.
as of now, their June test is still happening and their July test is still happening. But we will also take a wait and see approach to determine whether or not this will be moved back.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that College Board for the SAT has decided June is too early and has canceled, but the ACT hasn't yet. But then again, they haven't updated us in a couple of days, so maybe we're just jumping the gun. Maybe tomorrow or the day after, ACT will provide a different update. And I think that's really been kind of the theme of this month. Just we have to continue every day to check our college portals, our student accounts, to just see what these updates are, because I think honestly this is a question of when, and not a lot of people have answers to when things will subside.
Hmm.
With that being said, school closures is another question of when. I was reading on the news that a lot of schools have started to um, extend the school closure till the end of May,
Yeah.
like May 20th, May 25th, I've read for some school districts. What does this mean? How do I accommodate for this?
I mean, at this point, we talked about this a little bit during our last episode, but I think that we should still be moving forward by focusing on our schoolwork as we can virtually, trying to meet with your teachers through office hours if at all possible, trying to get some FaceTime with them because you're still going to need their rec letters for some colleges next year.
Mm,
And then outside of that, finding ways for you to stay productive while you're at home. So I think a lot of our Southern California students, for their schools, they've already stated that they're not going back to school physically this year. And
mm.
so, we just have to, again, stay as productive as we can. Obviously, again, prioritizing our safety, of course, but outside of that, just prioritizing also our schoolwork and making sure that we are using this time effectively.
If a lot of school districts have now made the decision that we aren't going to continue at least until the beginning of June, I'm starting to see how that then overlaps with summer program periods. What's going to happen with summer programs if even until June schools are closed?
So I think, I mean, a lot of summer programs have gone virtual. They've already decided that they're going to stay, but they're going to be online learning. Some internships are the same way, but there are a handful of summer programs that have just been canceled outright.
Mhm.
And so as of now, again, I mean, some programs haven't decided on anything yet, and they're still trying to determine what the state of the coronavirus will be by the time the programs end up happening. So, we should still, we're recommending for our students that we're still moving forward, trying to figure out, um, what their plans are going to be this summer. And
Mm.
then if things don't work out, then we're trying to find alternative options, which again, we discussed a bit during our last episode.
Being creative with your time,
Yeah.
using the online Zoom. Apparently Zoom is raising a bit of contention in terms of its security
I
purposes.
saw
But
that. Yeah.
other than that, okay, so we need to be more creative with how we spend our free time at home.
Hmm.
And that's something that maybe we can brush up on in a future episode.
Yeah,
But thank you so much, Counselor Vincent, for sticking
definitely.
around with us. I think that's going to put us to a close for now. Until next time, don't
Hmm.
forget to subscribe and follow us on on our podcast or our website, www.thehallpasspodcast.com. We also have an Instagram account, The Hall Pass Podcast. If you missed any of our episodes, you can also find it on iTunes or on our website. Again, we want to thank our sponsors, the Admission Masters. For our high school students who want a mentor and counselor to guide you and help navigate your high school career, join the Admission Masters family. You'll get personalized services that are focused and tailored to make you a successful student and overall individual. All of the Admission Master services are accessible online and virtually. So for those of you who want to get started today, call our office. Alrighty, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in again to another one of our special episodes. We would love for you to send us additional emails of general topics and questions you might want us to cover in our podcast at thehallpasspodcast@gmail.com. And yeah, until next time, have a great one.